We are here today with Robert Cano, who is writing or has written the book Dark Archer, which I believe is coming out sometime soonish.
hmm
Uh-huh.
April 9th is its re-release date. It
Ah,
was originally released July 26th of 2018, but
okay.
I since switched publishers. So
That usually requires a re-release. Yep.
yeah,
Yep. That's a thing. Okay, so tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're working on at the moment, not the re-release. We'll get to that later.
of course. So right now, I have been busy at work working on the next book
Mm-hmm.
because we have the re-release of The Dark Archer, obviously, but we also have a new release for The Shadow Cult, which is the sequel to The Dark Archer.
Ah,
Uh, and so uh, outside of that, I've actually been writing the next book in that series. And so I've been really busy. It's a lot of fun though. I enjoy it, and even the harder parts of writing, I find enjoyment in some weird sadistic way, I guess.
well, I mean, to be fair, you are a writer, so if you didn't find enjoyment in even the hard parts of writing, then
What am I doing? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so now that you're writing all of the sequels, I have to ask, we have to talk about The Dark Archer because otherwise we will have no idea what's going on.
Mm.
C'est la vie. Oh well. So tell us enough that you're not giving away too many spoilers.
Well, my novella, The Suffering, was written off of a short story that I had done. And this short story was meant to be published in an anthology.
Hmm.
And when I submitted it, what happened was the people who were doing the anthology were like, "There's too much going
Mm.
on here for it to just sit here as a short story." They said that it was good, but they just couldn't publish it because it was just too much. There's a lot of characters, there's a lot of story, there's a lot of things to explore, and so they're like, expand this, like make it big. And so I put that on the back burner,
Hmm.
and I wrote The Suffering, which is a backstory to one of those characters in the short story.
Oh.
And it was told entirely from her perspective. Well, The Dark Archer is a spin-off from The Suffering, and it tells the story of Bene, who is the captain that we meet in the very opening of The Suffering.
Aha.
Um, and we don't see him again until the epilogue of The Suffering. And so, what we find out in The Dark Archer is what happens immediately after that. And we get some more of the backstory to what eventually, to what transpired in those years while um, he was captured. And then even before that, we get more of the backstory to, what happened with him
Hmm.
um, while they were in that neighboring kingdom.
Hmm.
And so it was a very interesting time to be writing because I tend to do a lot of world building, but
Yes.
yeah, but I also like to focus on character
Uh-huh.
because for me, character is such a big deal. And um, I think it's important to be able to explore world building through our characters as
Hmm.
opposed to just, random exposition, right?
Right.
And so, like for me, that was super important to try and get a good balance in.
Hmm.
And I feel like I did that. I really do. And so it was a lot of fun for me to kind of explore that. But as far as like not giving a whole lot away, I think my editor said it best when she said that The Dark Archer is a plot line where um, the happy ending we seek
Hmm.
is the protagonist's death.
Yes. Oh,
Yeah,
That's gonna be great.
It's a really really different ride. I turn a lot of things on their heads. I set up an early antagonist, and it's not what you think it is, and and then at the very end, who's the villain? That's the
Right.
question. And so it's fantastic. I put a lot of thought into it. It's a contemplative book. It's not meant to have like a whole lot of um like antagonism in it, because while there are those people in our lives who are antagonistic, right?
Mm-hmm.
But often I have found that our greatest enemy is not without, but within.
Yeah.
And so these are things that I explore a lot. I explore the concepts of PTSD and depression. I explore these ideas of friendship and how to be able to move forward in life. What does that look like? What does that feel like? How do we find the redemption? And me being a vet and having veteran friends and stuff, these are things that I drew from as
Yeah.
far as that goes. Is sometimes we're asked to do really horrible things, and what about those things are we able to find redemption from? How do we seek that?
Mm-hmm.
And so these are concepts that I explore throughout the book.
Very cool. Because a lot of times in the large scale fantasy, you don't see as much of that, I think. It's more, well, usually several characters act as the singular representation of a person on the outside. The reader, per se, can see themselves in several different characters because they each have a distinctive trait. So to be able to combine that and look more inside a singular character, oh,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, and I've had readers tell me that each of the main characters in my book is special.
Mm-hmm.
Like they felt like each character had their own arc, even
Very.
though a lot of them end up together, right? Um, that each of them have their own story, their own. Uh, they're each seeking something,
Mm-hmm.
and we get to look through that. So.
Ooh, very fun. Very
Mhm.
fun. Now, I would love to ask about books 2 and 3, but I'm not sure if I should because spoilers?
I think I can avoid some spoilers for you
Okay,
guys.
go for
So it is funny though, because I think about the Dark Archer, and I'm like, okay, well, what was the whole point of that one, right?
it.
So uh, based on what I've told you, I would say the Shadow Cult then starts looking outside. It's
Ah.
external. There is an external threat that created Bene in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And so we are looking for that threat. We are trying to find it. We are trying to discover what is its purpose and what is its goal. Why does it even exist? And where did it come from? You
Mm-hmm.
know, will we find all the answers? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe the threats are bigger than we think they are.
Maybe. Mm-hmm.
And then when we get to the end of book three, well, I haven't written the end of book three yet, but when we get to book three, it slows down a lot.
Uh-huh.
So in the Shadow Cult, it's very fast paced. It's bigger. It's almost 40,000 words more than the Dark Archer, but it's very fast paced. Like it just whooshes by. And but in the World Soul, which is a third book, I went ahead and I slowed it all down. I was like, let's slow this down, and I'm going to look back inside again. But also, like the threat is much bigger than you think it is, right? And so I had a lot of fun with that. And then I kind of brought in an old god too. So yeah, we're gonna tear some worlds apart.
Yes. Ah, it's gonna be great. Let's watch the, end of the world. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Always fun. So how many books are in the series? Is it just a trilogy, or are you gonna do more, maybe?
I'm gonna definitely do more. I have plans for 9 books in
Mm-hmm.
the major arc.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be separated into 3 trilogies.
Mm-hmm.
So this first trilogy will end with the world's soul, and
Okay.
then we move across the sea to the continent of Telerian,
Mm-hmm.
and that continent is going to have its own trilogy next. And then we're going to go to another continent, which is on the other side of the world, and everything's going to come to a head there.
Very fun.
Yeah.
Oh. And I assume are you going to follow the same characters throughout, or are you going to have like 3 different sets of characters?
It's going to be 3 different sets of characters, but there is going to be 2 major characters who are going to be threads throughout.
Okay. Very fun. And all of this came from one short story.
All of this came from one short story. Can you imagine that?
So what happened to the short story?
It's actually the short story is actually going to be the third trilogy.
Not so short story then.
Yeah, yeah, I'm working on that. I actually reworked the opening to be more funny and stuff because the main character is hilarious. Um, she doesn't take a whole lot seriously. Um, Even though, I mean, she takes her job seriously, but she doesn't, like, outside of that, she's like loves messing with people and
Oh,
everything else. And yeah, she's something else. But the stakes are high, and she doesn't know it yet. So, the first book is going to be figuring out just what the stakes are.
oh, yeah. You're gonna be one of those writers who are like, oh no, the writer did this again.
Hmm.
We hate them for it, but we also, love the books. So yeah, I can
Yeah,
tell. You're
I'm
you're
that
gonna,
guy.
yeah.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah. There's a very specific scene in The Dark Archer that everybody hates me for. I have gotten so many messages, and they're just like,
Oh.
"You did not," and I'm like,
As a writer, I love doing that to readers
"Yeah,
so much. Yeah.
yeah." Well, and the biggest thing is nobody saw it coming because there is no lead up for it. It's just how life is. There's
Ah,
spontaneous events that, oh my God, what the heck. And yeah, that's what happens.
that's gonna be fun. Oh, yes. I can't tell if I'm going to probably hate that scene or I'm gonna like appreciate that even more now. Hmm.
Mm,
We'll have to
it
find.
might be a little bit of both, yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably. So as far as the writing process goes, you said there are bits that you just don't like. What are those bits?
Oh, I hate writing the blurb.
The blurb. Oh gosh, blurbs.
Yeah, there's like I can write everybody else's. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, I don't even have to read the book. Just give me a basic idea, and I'm like, here, I'll help you. I'll give you a heck of a start, right?
Yeah.
But for my own, I can't do it. I suck. I'm like, I don't know what the heck is going on here. There's so
Blurbs
much
are
going on in my book.
blurbs are an art form that I have not mastered at all.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
you're
they're tough, aren't they?
yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
how do you get people interested in like really small amount of space?
yeah. I mean, and there's so much, obviously. I mean, and I think a lot of it really comes into the fact that we're so close to our books
Hmm.
that we know all of it, right? We wrote all of it, so it's like, hey, I want this in there, and I want this in there, and I want this in there, but I can't. So
Yeah.
then you have to try and like pick stuff, and you still aren't able to pick an amount that's small enough to fit there, and it's just like, no.
Yeah.
So how do you incorporate more into less?
Um um I'm the wrong person to ask.
But you know what I mean.
I know exactly what you mean, and I have no idea how to do it. I just kind of put something down and hope for the best.
Hey, there you go. Do you at least have people who can help you, readers and stuff
Oh
who can
yeah.
help?
Oh
Yeah,
yeah. They are so helpful. All of
yeah,
those people who, if they don't get back to me, I'm like freaking out.
yeah. I rely on my editor a lot.
Yeah.
I'll send her an idea of a blurb, and usually she'll have read the because she'll already be working on it.
Right.
So she'll have read it, and she can help me with that, which is helpful.
Oh yeah.
Smart cookie, that one. So I rely on her a lot for that kind of stuff, and yeah, it helps.
Yeah, editors are worth their weight in gold.
Absolutely.
Mm,
Absolutely. I mean, I am an editor, and I still tell people, and I live what I practice. I tell people, don't ever rely on your own editing skills for your own book.
no,
Don't do
no,
it, because you're gonna miss stuff. That's just
you're too close.
get other eyes on it. You have to get other eyes on it.
hmm That's my problem is I can look at other people's work and having the linguistics background, I know how to tweak things and make it better for other people. For
Yeah.
myself, not so much.
Hmm.
So yeah. hmm hmm Okay. Always fun. So, as far as the editing stuff goes, how do you keep managing that between writing your own stuff and then editing other people's work?
I'm very picky.
Okay.
Um, I really am. I have I have a few clients that I will continuously work with.
hmm
Um, and then I found, uh, found, found's not really a right word, but a really good friend of mine, he has a niece who wrote a probably a novella. It's
hmm
not really a novel, it's a novella, but um, and this is probably weird coming from me. It's a YA book, and I
hmm
don't read YA. That's like a rule. But what she did stands apart from YA.
Oh,
So it's young adult in the idea that very um it's very much about like coming of age
sure.
and that kind of stuff, right? But how the author approached it, super impressive.
Oh,
Uh,
subverting
and
type of thing.
very much so.
Ooh.
It's almost like she knew what the tropes were, and then
hmm
she just like went haywire with them. And I love that, right?
That's yeah, it's always impressive when authors manage to do it because usually you see one or two that have been
Mhm.
subverted, but not all that many.
Right, right. And that's one of the things about like specifically the YA genre that
hmm
bothers me is that it's so tropey. You know, yes, there's very little variance through it. Like you could read dystopia and an urban fantasy, and they literally sound exactly the same.
Yeah, I
And
noticed that. Yeah.
you've noticed that too. Okay, so I just as a rule I stopped reading them altogether.
hmm
Um, and also I don't like the juvenile writing. I just don't.
hmm
I prefer something that's more meaty, something that's got depth to it. I don't necessarily like burning through books.
hmm
I like enjoying it and savoring a book, and not all readers are me though. I've come to learn. Um, but that's okay too.
There's a genre for everybody.
There is. I write in a very classical style,
Yeah.
which comes from my very heavy poetry background, where I started out writing poetry, for my girlfriend as a teenager, and it was that teenage angsty crap. It was horrible.
I think
And
everyone does that at some point.
I think everyone does that at some point, and mine was just as bad. But I actually stuck with poetry, and I came to love form. And while I will say that not all of it's great, I think I have quite a few poems that I'm very proud of,
hmm
that will stand the test of time.
hmm
And to be able to say that, like that's a
That's
big
great.
deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I love that kind of thing. And so I incorporate a lot of those elements into my writing,
Mm-hmm.
into my novels. And I call it poetic prose. Like that's kind of,
Oh, interesting.
yeah, there are a lot of scenes where I put that into, especially in The Dark Archer. Oh my goodness. Like like for instance, there's a scene I really love where Bennett is in some ruins
Mm-hmm.
and he's exploring, and he's realizing like what happened here, right? And he's trying to figure out like why did this happen. But then he goes into this building. It's kind of like a massive cathedral, and he sees, the corner where the roof was blown out, right? There's boulders and stuff that were used to destroy things and whatnot. And he goes in there and he sees this one star, and he just stares at it. And it's so beautiful, right? Like there's these quiet moments in my book that are just like I had to put them in there, right?
Ah.
And it was so crazy because then, I'm learning about how to make a screenplay out of my
Oh,
book.
oh my.
Yeah, a whole other beast, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and probably more than I can chew, honestly. But it's fun to learn new stuff.
Yeah.
So, I decided to try and do that, and I get to scenes like that, and I'm like, you can't put this into screenplay words.
No.
It doesn't work.
No. I mean, it would work if you were doing the film yourself, and then also the visual arts editor was you, and the director was you, and you could then decide, okay, yes, you're going to walk into the corner and look up, and there will be a star, but you can't actually put that in the screenplay because that's not
Right.
what it calls for.
Yeah, yeah, and that would make it so difficult because there's a lot of scenes like that where it's just like one character by themselves,
Hmm.
and so obviously there's no dialogue.
Right. So
You
how do you
know,
incorporate that?
how do you incorporate that? How do you make sure that those moments are not lost?
Yeah.
And so that's the tricky part. But those are the moments that I feel like oftentimes were the most powerful for
Hmm.
me, at least.
Hmm. Ooh, very fun. Okay, I'm very curious though how you go about your poetic prose. You said, You know,
Mhm.
being a language nerd. Thank you very
Okay.
much. Um, I want to know a little bit more about the technical bits. No one else will probably care except other word nerds out there, but go for it anyways because.
So the technical bits. Uh, so one of the things that I've always focused on in poetry is meter,
Mhm.
right? Obviously, the technicalities behind meter requires entire semester just in understanding that itself.
Yeah.
Like it's not something that you just learn.
No, oh gosh.
Like you have to understand how language flows, how it flows out of our mouths and
Mhm.
stuff like that. English is actually very easy to learn with comparatively to other languages because our words naturally have that rhythm,
Mhm.
right? And you can hear it whenever we speak out loud. And so that's one of those things that's really cool. So I focus on especially in those quiet moments in my novels, I focus on that. I focus on the breathing, on the in, the out, and that kind of stuff because it doesn't, and it's what's crazy is it doesn't just quiet the mind, it quiets the reader,
Mhm.
right? Now, of course, this is usually before something big happens. I'm not planning that at all, right?
No, no, there's no
No,
plan there. I
no,
mean,
no plan there. I'm not trying to subvert you and then,
no.
make you go crazy. Not at all.
No, I mean, why would you think? I mean, you can't prove anything.
Right? Just saying. Uh, but so then I look at the ideas of metaphor. I look at these different elements that I can put in there. I don't use a lot of simile.
Hmm.
I really don't. Like I've read a lot of books where authors they're very smart with their simile usage,
Hmm.
and They can be pithy, or they can be um, vicious, or they can be like, any number of these things with them, right? But I've never been good at that.
Mm-hmm.
So I focus on my strengths, and I'm like, I'm good at metaphor. I can take something, especially in poetry, I can take something and I can make it completely something else,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I'll use little words. So there's been times when I write about like a ruin,
Mm-hmm.
right? But I'll use personification. Use, you know, words like her, she, things like that to describe different aspects of what's happening as
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at it, even if it's just in my mind's eye. And these ideas, the crumbling rocks, or
Mm-hmm.
the this or that, they add imagery, but they also add figurative elements,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which I think a lot of people forget about. They forget about those things until they actually read it, and then they're like, "Oh my God, this is like,
All
you
right.
know,
Yeah, it adds an extra bit of depth to it.
yes, yes." And I tell people, I'm like, you can. I want what I wanted was I wanted to write a book that you could read through,
Mm-hmm.
but I wanted you to be able to go back and read through it again and find
Yeah.
new stuff.
Oh, yes, I love that.
And so, I put in those kind of elements.
Mm-hmm.
I put in things like Easter eggs, like everywhere. I'm a
Yeah.
big nerd. I'm such a huge nerd. So if you are a gamer like me, if you are a reader like me, if you love movies, there is stuff in there for all of it. If you
Yes.
love Tolkien, there are nods to Tolkien everywhere. Absolutely everywhere. They're not obvious, but they're in there. And
Ooh.
and I love doing that kind of stuff. And so,
Yes.
and
Those.
then as I move forward in the series, I'm adding stuff from the past also.
Mm-hmm.
Things that we've seen before, people we've known before. It's like, oh my God, wait, that person came back. Wait, oh, what's going on? And so yeah, it's so awesome.
Ooh, fun. Yeah. Very great. Oh, I love all of that. Of the people out there who have written and or do write classical style epic fantasy, is there someone whose abilities you'd like to steal? Writing abilities, that is.
Uh Pure world building would be Tolkien.
Well, I mean,
Hands down.
he's
There's no, yeah, I mean, there's nobody better,
well,
honestly.
to be fair, he developed the language first and then created the world to fit the language and decided that it needed to have a story. So
Pretty
he
much.
his world building is, yeah, second to none.
It's bonkers. Yeah, I agree. Um, what I think what I have done though is I've kind of taken elements
Hmm.
from each of my favorite authors.
Yeah.
And I don't read just fantasy. Like I read kind of everything.
Hmm.
Um, my favorite author of all time is actually Thomas Harris,
Okay.
who wrote, Red Dragon,
Hmm.
Silence of the Lambs, Hannibal.
Hmm.
And quite frankly, Hannibal to me is the perfect novel. I mean, of course, it needed the buildup of the other two books, but that book to me is the best novel I've ever read.
Yeah.
Um, and the reason for that is because there's all this buildup,
Hmm.
right? And then you get to, the end of Hannibal, and somehow you're cheering for the person who was the villain the entire time. You know,
Yep. I have
and
experienced that. It's
yeah,
quite fun.
it
Probably
is.
a
It
little bit
is.
problematic in the real world, but
But how amazing is that? Like,
yeah.
but I think a lot of times what happens is, and this comes back to the whole villainy thing, is, and I would say that Martin did a fantastic job
Hmm.
as far as making gray characters.
Hmm.
It wasn't black and white like Tolkien was pretty much, everything was black and white with Tolkien.
Yeah.
With Martin, he subverted all of that, and everybody was a gray character. Everybody had issues. Everybody could be a villain at any point.
Mm-hmm.
If it furthered their own personal agenda.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we might pick on Joffrey or Cersei or, um, who's the other one that we hated, Ramsay. But just because they were the obvious villains didn't make them the only villains. And sometimes they were definitely not the worst,
Mm-hmm.
you
Well,
know.
yeah, it's always fun.
Yeah. And so like those elements were fun as well, well, what is honor and what does that look like, and so I kind of like morph these different attributes, right? And so I would say like Bennett is definitely a black and white character.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a lot of depth, and but he's struggling so hard to hold on to his humanity because he's a wraith, by the way. He got turned into a wraith.
Oops.
And yeah, and so he's struggling so hard to hold on to what he has left of his humanity because he doesn't want to be just a mindless killer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and if you know about the ancient Fey lore of wraiths, they were there were basically two different types. So you had the typical wraith who was just vicious, soul sucking killer, right? But then you had the other type, which often ended up being called either a watcher or a guardian.
Mm-hmm.
And they still had to kill to, you know, that was just part of the nature. But they were also good in a way,
Mm-hmm.
right? Their purpose was good.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so it makes it very interesting to deal with something like a creature that we don't understand, right? Like a wraith, and then try and add humanity to it. And so that's what I was like. That was like my subversive
Yep.
treatment of my characters was, you know, how do I explore something? Because I had a reader ask me, it's like, you wrote a book where the characters are um he's like the story could have been in any genre, why
Sure.
fantasy? And so I had to think about that. That was one of those things where, well, that's why, like, imagine being able to explore things through a very, like, probably most feared fae, who has no soul,
Mm-hmm.
who is looking for a soul, and who is trying to, feed, right? Because that's what they need. They need to constantly feed.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean? And what kind of fear would that drive into people? And yet, what if he was good?
Ooh.
So yeah, I had way too much fun with that.
Yep. Sounds fantastic though. So I say
Yeah.
go for it and continue on having fun with causing trouble.
Oh yeah, always.
hmm Okay, so for writery types, trying to get into your area of expertise, and I'm going to say in that case, fantasy perhaps, but also more of the realistic characters, the characters who are human and not just words on a page. Are there traps that they should avoid?
Um, I would say in a lot of ways, focus heavily on dialogue,
hmm
right? Not necessarily throughout the book, but one of my major complaints is that dialogue doesn't feel natural.
hmm
Um, and we see that a lot where um, dialogue takes a back seat to, say, um, world building or to description or to these different elements. And I would argue that if you can master the dialogue,
hmm
then you're about 10 steps ahead of everyone else, because that is actually one of the trickier parts, and especially being able to carry the story
hmm
with the dialogue,
hmm
right? um, and one of the big things that I try and explain is instead of things to avoid, it's more, for me, it's more about things to explore.
Sure. Yeah.
Do exercises, see if it works, right? Write 5, 6 pages of something
Mm-hmm.
that explores a certain aspect of writing, that explores a certain element of the genre you're looking for, and see if it works.
Mm-hmm.
And if it works, even if it's 100% tropey, then it works, right?
Sure.
And that's okay. Use it. Like those kinds of things are good to have. Those
Mm-hmm.
kinds of tools and everything. So for me, that's one of the big things is it's not so much about what to avoid as it is about how to apply it to your own style and your own ability.
Probably
And
trickier things out there.
yeah, yeah. Just because I mean, I've read books that are, just cliche after cliche after cliche, but they worked
Mm-hmm.
because the book actually knew what it was doing, right? The author knew what they were doing, and everything they did was absolutely on purpose,
Mm-hmm.
right? They didn't just put in, like, the dawn breaking, like, they played with it, like literally the sun was coming up and it was cracked or something, like they played with these things, and it was really cool and it
That
was
is really
really
cool.
fun, you know so when you're, as an author, when you're creating these worlds and you're creating these things, even if it's in our world, play with it, you
Mm-hmm.
know have fun and play with it. Like, don't try to be. I think one of the biggest problems that we have, as far as pitfalls as writers, is that we try to be too much of somebody or something else.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
know, stop doing that. You know, don't be Anne Rice. She's brilliant.
Sure.
She's absolutely a wonderful author.
Oh
In
yeah.
my opinion, her description is second to none.
Uh-huh.
So pull what you can from that, but don't be her,
Right.
right? Because there's already an Anne Rice. And there's already a Thomas Harris, there's already a J.R.R. Tolkien, there's already, all these people. You don't need to be them,
Mm-hmm.
so don't try to be, just be you, but play with those things, have fun with those things, change them up. That's one of the reasons why I went with a classical voice in my writing, was because I wanted something unique.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to be different. I read a lot of books where I'm like, this is really good, but there's not a lot of depth to it. And I want depth in my world. I want depth in my writing.
Yes.
And so I spent probably close to 20 years trying to figure out what that meant for me,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And that's the other aspect, is don't rush anything. Take
Yeah.
your time. You
That's
know,
always a hard one, I think.
it is. It is. It's like, I want to be an author. I want to be an author. I want to be a writer. I want to do this. Well, okay, so do it,
Yeah.
but don't expect you to be,
Right off the bat.
publishable
Yeah.
like on your first go. Like,
Oh,
that's not
some of
how
my
that
first
works.
drafts, my first stories, I'm like, oh, cringe. Should never have to see the light of day, ever.
I'm with you there. I actually have about 88,000 words that I had written that were for the continent of Telerian.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll use some of that. I'll
Mm-hmm.
use some of the plot lines and stories and stuff like that. But as far as actual, like, just taking that and reworking it, no, no. I mean, it's not horrible, but it's not good.
No. I know that feeling very well. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. Well, and it was another experiment too. So I do these experiments, and
Mm-hmm.
so, like, that one was, how do I fill in those time breaks, right?
Uh,
So I was like, oh, I'm gonna do backstory during these time breaks. It doesn't work the way you want it to.
really?
Yeah, no, it really didn't. Like, I think if you did it sparingly, but
Uh-huh.
like for me, it was like every other chapter or something. Um,
Wow. That is a lot.
yeah,
Uh,
it
I
would
love hard
throw.
follow.
Yeah, it would throw the reader. Like, I think it would pull the reader out of the story completely.
Yeah.
Even though it fills in blanks and stuff, I think it would just pull the reader out. So when I actually start writing that trilogy in earnest, I'm just gonna pull aspects of it out and tell those stories. I think I'm gonna start with the grandfather in the
Mhm.
first trilogy, because the grandfather is amazing. And then, in the second trilogy, I'm gonna tell the story of the dad, and then, the third story is gonna be the son.
Mhm.
So it's gonna be those three across the trilogy, and the son is the one that comes across these really dangerous things that he has to deal with, and he ends up being granted long life, and
Oh.
so we end up seeing him chase the ends of the world in that third trilogy, and he comes across certain people that we know and love already.
Mhm.
So
Very fun.
yeah.
This is gonna be, yeah, your books are gonna be one of those that I become addicted to and are like, okay, when's the next one coming out?
Right. Yeah, I'm planning that. Like, I have readers already who are like that, and so I'm pretty excited because I'm like, all right, well, let's do it.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Oh, like I need, more books to be addicted to, but oh well, it'll be fine. Yep, this will be, I mean, it's always a good thing to,
What's one more?
yeah,
What's one more series?
that's, you don't, yeah. Oh, well, luckily for me, if I do it right, then my authors put them out at alternate points, so I'm never without something to read. It's
There
always.
you go.
Hmm. Well, it has
Yeah.
been super fun talking with you today. I learned a whole lot about characters and causing trouble with characters.
Mm,
Hmm.
it's fun. Yeah.
Uh, is there anything else you'd like to add? Writing related, not writing related, whatever?
Probably no, not really. I mean, I just you know, I think for me it's just about getting people interested. You
Yeah.
know, don't be afraid of the classical styling or anything, and don't be afraid to want to go back and read something. I
Yeah.
think I think that's a lot of some of our favorite books we end up going back and rereading, and I
Over,
think it's
over, and over, and over.
exactly.
Yeah.
And why? Because the story was deeper and the message was richer, and that kind of thing. So, for a lot of our new authors who are coming up who want to do that too, you know, let's find new classics,
Yeah.
right? Let's enjoy these things. Let's find ways to discuss and move forward with that. Like, I think that it's a beautiful thing. And it's not going to be for everyone. Some people just want a James Patterson book that they can read in 3 hours,
Sure.
and that's fine too. I'm not going to say that that's a wrong thing to do, but I'm saying don't be afraid to explore deeper, more richer
Hmm.
styles.
Yeah. It just depends on what the day is, I guess.
It really does. It really, like, I love the Alex Cross series, so some days I'm just like, gotta read it.
Hmm. Some days you need something that lasts a little longer. Some days all I can do is read Calvin and Hobbes.
All same. But there's nothing better than Calvin and Hobbes in the
Right?
comic world. Bill Watterson was life. So
Yeah. Oh, those. I think I know what I'm gonna do this afternoon.
yeah, yeah. Well, I have I think like pretty much everything he's ever written, so I'm always reading through them.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Always, always a good thing to do. Okay, well, it has been great talking with you. I hope you have a fantastic day.
I always love talking about this kind of stuff, so it's good.
Yeah. Yeah. Ooh. Okay, your book comes out when?
Okay, so The Suffering is available right
Uh-huh.
now. The Dark Archer will be available on April 9th.
9th. Okay, fantastic.
And The Shadow Cult will be coming out near the end of April, beginning of
Okay.
May-ish.
Okay.
We'll be doing a cover reveal very soon.
Ooh. Oh ho ho. Exciting.
Yeah, I'm
Uh,
excited. It's so good.
yeah. Yeah. That moment when you get to see your cover and you're like,
Yeah. Well, these all of my covers are 100% custom.
Yeah.
My artist is brilliant.
Yeah, well, I've seen the Dark Archer cover. It's pretty cool.
It's yeah, it was gorgeous, and um, it what's really cool about it is she somehow can capture what I picture in my head, and
That
so yeah, so Bennett has purple eyes, and I told her Bennett has purple eyes, and do with it what you will, and so when she drew the picture up, she drew it as if we were seeing the world through his eyes. Mind blowing. I know.
that's
She's
so cool.
she is brilliant. So, with this new cover for the Shadow Cult, I am just like already beside myself because it is phenomenal.
Okay. Now I'm excited about cover reveals too. Yep. Oh, yeah. Every now and again, I'm like, okay, I know exactly what this book is going to do to me. I haven't read it yet, but I know exactly what it's going to do, and it's going to be problematic because I can't stop reading.
Yeah, yeah, it is. I
Mhm.
hope so anyway.
I have a feeling if you're causing as much trouble as I think you're going to, then yes.
Hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, I am a troublemaker. That's
I
the
figured that
one
out.
thing I'm good at.
Yeah.